You're listening to the Woman of Value podcast. You are about to hear the story of a woman who is following her dreams and passions and creating positive change in the world.
Once I overcame some real difficulties from my childhood, I got my voice back and I understood who I was. And at that point, I understood that I had value and I understood what my values were. Sometimes we lose ourselves, and a lot of women have lost themselves to many things. And once we figure that out, and if we find ourselves again, we also are able to find our voices and recognize our own value.
My guest today is Christine Ristaino. She's a professor at Emory University, where she teaches Italian literature, memoir, culture, and language classes. I have her here because I love her book. She wrote a memoir called All the Silent Spaces, and it confronts the topics of violence, identity, and discrimination. She has published articles in The Guardian, Pacific Standard, The Washington Post, The Huffington Post, and The Atlanta Journal-Constitution on coping with violence and topics around diversity. Welcome to the show, Christine.
Thank you for having me.
So excited to have you. I really love this book, and I don't say that about every book, for sure. And it spoke to me on so many levels. And I know that the writing of this book was a process for you. So I always start with, what does a woman of value mean to you? And I think that writing this book had something to do with you finding your values. So I'd love to hear about that.
Absolutely. Well, I think all women have value, first of all. I mean, we all have value. It's just a matter of knowing that we have value. So when I think of what is a woman of value, all women are women of value. But how we figure that out sometimes takes a little longer because of the way society treats women, views women. We're in a very patriarchal society. For me, once I overcame some real difficulties from my childhood, I got my voice back and I understood who I was. And at that point, I understood that I had value and I understood what my values were. Sometimes we lose ourselves, and a lot of women have lost themselves to many things. And once we figure that out, and if we find ourselves again, we also are able to find our voices and recognize our own value.
I love that description of losing ourselves and finding our voice. And I can so relate to that because I felt I didn't have a voice so much of my life. And that's been my sort of coming out. So let's go there. Let's go to that moment when you really started to find your voice and find your value.
Sure. So it started on, September 15th, 2007, and I was attacked in front of my 3 and 5-year-old children. And they were inches away from me. By the end, I was on the ground, bleeding with a concussion, a black eye, and a broken nose. And that was a moment that changed my life, even though at that moment I didn't realize it. But shortly after that, I started asking a lot of questions and asking them for the first time in my life out loud. And that led to me searching not only for my own value, but trying to figure out how I had lost my own value to begin with.
The whole telling of that trauma, I can't even imagine, number one, being attacked, but number two, having your children in the shopping cart, and they were so little. And that comes up a lot in the book, of the helplessness that you felt to be there for your kids. And I particularly remember the gripping of the shopping cart, like that you wouldn't let go. Mm-hmm. And this man was punching you in the face and the eye and the jaw and pulling at your purse. And I just can't even imagine.
Well, it was so surreal. I didn't understand what was happening, first of all. And I knew I had to protect my kids. So my arms were just holding tight onto that shopping cart. But in order for the man to get my purse, I had to let go. And I finally did when he punched me so hard. It forced me to let go. And then while I was lying on the ground, I realized what he wanted, and he took the person and took off. But until that point, I didn't understand what was going on. All I knew was I had to keep my kids safe.
Yeah, I mean that's the mother's instinct, and I teach a boundaries course with a martial art expert actually, and we met because we were both writing about women's empowerment, but we came at it from very different places. And she and I teach about a concept that she created called the inner warrior. And the inner warrior is like what happened to you when you were attacked. It's this, I am here to protect my children. I will do whatever it's like you don't even know what takes over your body at that point. It's like this force comes in that
It's
is
like
incredible.
childbirth in some respects. It is, as even though it was a horrible event, it's as memorable as childbirth because of what kicked in that I wasn't even aware of during that time. Yeah, I did feel a certain amount of strength despite the fact that I was being beaten up in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, you hear of stories of women who like lift a car off their child and they don't know how did they do that? It's something takes over your body.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that women can do that.
Yeah,
Women do things because they have to. I mean, in a lot of ways, women are strong, and because they have to be. And I feel as though women don't even realize what they're capable of a lot of times, but they are super strong, and they can do so much. We can do so much.
yeah. So finding your voice, you were able to do so much more.
Yes.
And yeah, so talk about that.
Sure. So when I was attacked in front of my kids, a whole series of events happened. First of all, a few days before I was attacked, I showed my children a video, and it was a video on stranger danger. And it was fascinating because the kids, I wasn't sure, first of all, if I should show it to them, but then I did because I felt like maybe they might need it at some point, although I didn't want them to be afraid of people. But then right after this attack happened, my 3-year-old said, "Mom, he was a don't know." And I realized he has the language to talk about this. And that was
Mm,
powerful. I had wanted to protect my kids. And from that point on, I protected them by giving them the language to talk about things. And I'm constantly asking them, do you want to know more? If they ask me a question, I'll tell them a bit. Then do you want to know more? I want them to be empowered with knowledge, not because they lack knowledge, or they're not empowered when they lack knowledge, to be honest with you. So that changed my parenting immediately, and with very positive results. And another thing that happened, a woman came up to me and right after, and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "It's okay, I'm okay." And she said, "It's not okay, and you're not okay. I saw it." And that was like a punch in the face in some respects, because up until that point, I had always ignored difficulty. I just felt I'm strong and I can deal with it, and I barreled ahead. But I never looked at the things that had happened to me in the past. And I had experienced trauma before. I was molested when I was 8 or 9 by somebody my whole family loved. And then I was raped violently when I was 21 by someone I didn't know. And I just went on. Every time I picked up and went on and didn't really even think about it. I told a few people, but not many. And I said, these 2 events have barely affected me. But anyway, of course they affected me, and they affected me in profound ways. I think when you hide things like that and you don't tell your story, and you actually go along with other people's stories, for example, about the man who molested me, everyone had these really positive stories, and I went along with those. I was terrified to talk about this other story. And when you ignore your voice in such a profound way, it becomes very easy to ignore everything in your life. I didn't even know what my voice sounded like. I didn't know how to listen for my voice. I never listened. So my main objective was, let's get people to get along. And so if I could make this person see this person's side, point of view, and then vice versa, vice versa, as they say in Italian, then I felt I had done my job, and I didn't even stop to consider in general what I thought about things. And I went on with my life that way for years. I mediated at work, I mediated at home, I mediated everywhere, but I ignored my own sense of self. And you know, I was pretty successful. I was a good mediator, and I did well in my career, but something was missing.
Yeah, keeping the peace is not the whole picture. And I'm a major peacekeeper, so I totally get it. And I personally feel for me, it was about growing up in chaos and wanting to create order.
Yeah,
And it's a good thing, right? It's a good skill to have, but not when you suppress your own self and
yeah,
not when you minimize your own pain and feelings. And even there's a part where you talk in the book about not having enough emotion in the book.
yeah.
And I think that's a common issue for people in general. It's like we tell the story, but we don't tell the feelings.
Mhm.
And vulnerability is difficult. It's difficult, and it's also the key to intimacy. It's the key to connecting deeply with people. So
Yeah.
tell us, like, what have you learned about your own vulnerability through this process?
Well, one thing I have learned is how to feel. And it was interesting, right at the towards the end of this process, my I was going to see a counselor. I felt I had been to see counselors before, but I went and sought out the, you know, the person who was highly trained in trauma. And I told her my whole story, and it was close to when I was going to publish the book. And she said, "You know, you've thought so much about this, you've analyzed it, but you've never felt this. No, you've never felt it." And I realized she was absolutely right. And in a way, that's what I was missing. I could intellectualize all I want, but if I didn't feel the effects of these events, then how was I going to heal from them? You know, if I didn't allow myself to feel the pain and the hurt, then I wouldn't be able to move through the pain and the hurt. And so that's what I focused on after that. And that was really hard, but quite liberating. And that's when I really started hearing my voice, surprisingly enough. I When I was thinking about and actually mourning the man who had molested me because I loved him, kind of mourning that loss and mourning that betrayal, I found myself crying a lot, you know, just feeling it, feeling the betrayal for the first time in my life. And that felt so good. It was cleansing. I had
Mm,
never allowed myself to feel it before, and there was something about it that was beautiful. And then at the same time, when I was allowing that to wash through me, something else washed through me, and that was my own voice, my own identity, who I saw, you know, or my own. I saw myself for the first time, and I had a pretty low esteem and low vision of myself. But suddenly, I saw myself in a different light, or maybe saw myself for the first time ever. And I saw that I had a lot to give to the world. And
mm,
you know, I like myself and I like what I'm doing in the world. But I had never allowed myself to see that person.
wow. So there's a softening that I heard as you were saying that. It's like almost like a little girl came out, you know, and I think that often when we share, like when we start to really feel, it's the authentic you, and it's sort of it's like exposing yourself, you know. It's like, here I am. And I think that it's one of the hardest things for people to do, and also it's one of the most attractive things you can do because people are drawn to the essence of who you are.
Yeah.
And that was reflected very much in your book. Your vulnerability, your willingness to not be right,
Mhm.
but to really explore, like, what are the prejudices that I have? What are the fixed ideas I have about things? And you know, when you're open about everything, and like people have said to you, you know, you're too trusting, you think everybody's amazing and everybody has good in them, you can get hurt. And so it's also about the balance of, I can't trust everyone, but I also don't want to walk around thinking the world is a bad place.
Yeah, and I spent a while being afraid after I was attacked,
Hmm.
but I never stopped trusting people completely, and I don't want to. I love people. I feel as though for me, connecting with people is one of the biggest gifts in the world. It's one of the greatest gifts, and the most authentic moments that we ever have is when we're having conversations. And for me, the conversations now are so much deeper than they used to be. They're so much more meaningful because I allow myself to go there. And I'm not, I think before I was afraid of hurting people's feelings, so I wouldn't step into the difficult. I was, maybe nice, but I don't really want to be nice anymore. I want to be real, and that's different. And by being real, I think I'm doing a better um, service to the world because I'm opening up in a way that I never did before, and I can see the results because when I taught Italian, I teach Italian, and I would go into my classroom and just teach, and it was teaching Italian, but I wouldn't bring the rest of myself there. I wouldn't talk about my kids or my husband or my book or my passion for writing. I was just teaching Italian. The students would come, would have a great time, and then they'd leave. But now I bring my whole self, and I can get teary sometimes in class, and I admit when I'm having a bad day, and we go much deeper. It's not just Italian, it's life. And then my students are always coming to my office hours and calling me, and I just feel as though I'm really connecting with them in a way that I always wanted to connect, but somehow couldn't.
Yeah. Well, that it's obvious that connection is so important to you. It's
Yes,
like
connect.
it's clear in everything, everything that you share here.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's just when you're interested in pleasing or you're not bringing your whole self, you're still connecting, but not fully. And when you connect fully, you also give other people permission to connect. You give them permission to look within and go deeper. And I just gave a speech about the light within us, and I was talking about how when our light shines, we give other people permission to shine.
Yeah.
And we're taught the opposite. Don't shine too brightly. You might shadow somebody else. You have to dim your light to make other people shine. And the opposite is true, but that's not the message most of us grow up with.
Sure. I think the other message that we have is don't air our dirty laundry. Don't talk about our difficulties, especially my generation. If you talk about your difficulties, you're weak. And I actually think the opposite is true. If we share our difficulties, we're strong. Being vulnerable is strength, not weakness. And
Yeah.
that's when people realize how common our experiences are. We have so much in common.
Yeah, and that's a common theme in your book. Also, finding the sameness in us all. And I think we tend to also be brought up to look at people as the other.
Yeah.
And I know I was brought up in a very narrow-minded environment. I went to an all-girls school. Everything was about my religion, and we were kept very isolated from other people. And now I meet so many people of all races, religions, colors, ages, and I love the full experience of it. And so you really challenged yourself, though, because this was an African American man who attacked you. I know that you had fears of African American men for a while. Like it just kept bringing the trauma up. And also the other part that I thought was fascinating was the trauma from the molestation, and being afraid to leave your daughter in a home with a dad who was home alone.
Mhm.
But then you confronted it. So tell that story, because I think that was really pivotal.
Certainly. So, well, regarding first of all, regarding your comments about race, I was so afraid that this would make me and my kids racist in some way because I was worried that we would be afraid of Black men. And I was afraid of that because right away my son started hiding behind my legs every time he saw a Black man. And I had to sit down with him and just say, this was just one man, Benny. Like this wasn't every man. It was just one man. And it's important not to generalize. And I had to work too, not to be afraid of people who looked like my attacker. And I think anyone who was attacked has to do some work in that department.
Mm-hmm.
But regarding the parent, there was my daughter's best friend when she and my daughter were younger. Her father invited my daughter to come to his house and do some math homework because she was struggling with math, and he was an ex-teacher, and he said, "Oh, I can help her with that math." And I didn't want her to go because he was a stay-at-home dad, and he'd be there with his daughter and my daughter, but nobody else. And I kept coming up with excuses and excuses. And finally, I just told him, I said, I was molested as a kid by somebody we all trusted. And now I don't trust anyone with my daughter as a result. And, he just, his eyes were huge. His mouth was wide open. I was shocked, I think, because he didn't expect that to come out. And so then he took a deep breath. And it was funny because we were in a parking lot, and it was right after this event at my children's school. And right as I said that, all the parents started emptying the school, and we were surrounded by parents. And then the PTA president came up and started talking to him. And I think he composed himself during that time. Then afterwards, he said, I see you've been through some trauma. And he said, I'm not a child molester. And,
Right.
I can tell you that a million times, and that's not going to allay your fears. So I will tell you that my daughter's tutor is going to be at the same time. You can call and talk to her. You can call and talk to your daughter as many times as you need to. And so that's what we did. And then I came and picked her up. He gave me a tour of the house, and they've been best friends ever since. They're
Oh.
friends now.
So it's confronting the fear and being open.
Yeah,
And yeah, I love that you just shared that with him.
I had to. At a certain point, I ran out of excuses.
Right. Right.
I said, all right, let's see if this one sticks. That
Yeah.
and that was the truth of it. By being authentic with him, that was real. That was real.
Yeah. And as a in my work as a dating coach, I see women all the time do this where they're not even aware that they're projecting based on a past experience. They're projecting onto the person in front of them who they don't even know. And so, somebody cheated on you in the past, so you're looking for the cheater. You're looking for them to leave you. And it's like, oh, well, that must mean that. And that must mean, and so we're so full of assumptions and projections, and if we don't catch ourselves, we can end up really ruining our lives,
Yeah.
really.
Sometimes it's a self-fulfilling cycle because we are afraid somebody will leave us, and they eventually do because we're so afraid.
Yeah, we push them away.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people who have experienced trauma experience that distancing as well.
Yeah, but that's why it's important to really look at it, and heal, and do the work, because otherwise we carry so much stuff that we don't need to carry. It's heavy. It's really heavy to carry all that crap from the past.
Oh, it is. Recently, the last group of people from my family learned of what happened with the man who molested me, and they were having a tough time with it, and I knew that, and I thought that I was going to feel awful because they really didn't want to talk to me about it. But instead, I felt a real sense of relief. I said, finally, everybody knows. And it was the lightest I've ever felt in my life.
Mm.
And it's lasted. It's lasted. I still feel this lightness and this, I'm really embodying myself. I'm experiencing peace, I think is probably the best word to use.
Mm.
Because that secret, when you're holding it for so many years and you're so afraid of it, it kind of takes over. And I didn't realize how much space it was taking and how much anxiety it was causing me until it was gone, until there was nothing left to do.
Yeah, and its secrets can be very corrosive. And the other part of it is what you just shared is like, you don't tell those hard things so that everybody will appreciate it and embrace it. In
Mm.
the telling, you are releasing the secret, and it's not your job to make everybody agree with you, um, think that it's a good thing that you've shared it. You're doing it for you. And I think that when you take care of you, that's the most important thing, and then you're being true to you. So that's like, it's not our job to take care of the rest of the world and how they deal with our stuff emotionally.
Mhm. There's only so much we can do. If I feel, as long as I'm being authentic, as long as I can wake up in the morning and feel good about what I'm doing, and it feels right in my stomach and my heart and in my head, if I
Hmm.
can say, this is aligned, how this action that I've done, whatever it is, this conversation I've had aligns with what I believe, as long as that's always the case, then I feel good about myself, and
Yeah.
I'm not as bothered by whether or not somebody believes me, or whether or not somebody loves me, or whether or not somebody's rejected me for information that I've shared. So I don't know, I just feel released in a way
Yeah.
I never felt, and good about myself.
Yeah, it is very freeing to live true to you
Yeah.
instead of living in reaction to other people or to
Mhm.
please other people.
And that's
And
how I lived my whole life until
yeah,
was I just wanted people to be happy. I just wanted to please everyone. And a lot of that comes from trying to get over violence, and not, or having experienced violence and not inhabiting your body and yourself in a full way.
hmm,
That was my biggest problem, or at least that's what I struggled with. And I wasn't, to be honest with you, until now, I wasn't ready to talk about this. I couldn't have. I wasn't emotionally ready. I don't think I would have been able to handle the aftermath of telling people. I'm 52 now, and I'm finally ready. So took a long time, but
hey,
it's good to have arrived there.
it's never too late. I'm 63 and I just started telling my truth in my 50s too. So I totally get it.
50s are a really, I don't know, I feel like the 50s are a great time for women, because we
Yes.
finally get tired of things. I'm not going to, try to please everyone when I'm suffering inside with this secret.
Yeah, you can't live with that anymore. It's
No,
like the I think it was Anais Nin who talks about the time that comes when it's too painful to be in the bud and you have to come out. I don't remember the exact words when, it's just that's how I felt when I left my husband, when I started my new career. It's just too painful to stay in somebody else's life.
yeah.
There was a point in my life where my husband was a performer and he was a comedian, and we had a TV show together on Nickelodeon. And it was his show. I was one of the head writers. And at the end, he said to me, "Your dream has come true. You're on national television." And I was just like, that was not my dream at all. Like, seriously, that was your dream. And it was fun, but it was certainly not my dream.
Yeah.
And I think it was like that was one of my wake up calls, was like, what is my dream?
Hmm.
Now, what do I want to create? And it can feel scary. Like now you have this blank canvas. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah. It's terrifying and beautiful at the same time. And
Mm,
that's a powerful story that you just shared. I think a lot of women reach that point because we're also taught to be pleasers in our society. And so we're pleasing everyone and not even looking at what we need. And when I think, when you wake up, at least when I woke up, and realized that I was going to be powerful only when I was powerful within my own voice, not somebody else's, with my own projects, within my own life. That if I were an actor in my own life, ultimately I'd affect people in a much more powerful way. That was when things changed.
mm.
And it's a much nicer place to live. If you try to live as somebody else, they're going to do a much better job at that than we are.
That's true.
So, like, we might as well be ourselves and live ourselves fully.
Yeah, and what you said before about like not trying to please everybody, it's also like if people get pissed, it's okay. And being able to live with that because those are people who are not really respectful of your of who you are, what your values are, and those are not people who are supposed to be in your life anymore sometimes, and it's okay. And like the more you do it, the more at peace you are. And I'll tell you that my greatest joy is not just helping other women do this in their lives, but to help my children. And they are all amazing now at speaking up, at setting boundaries, at stop the auto yes, like, sure, I'll do that. Sure, I'll help you. I'll cook a meal. I'll do, it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do any of those things.
I relate to that so much because initially I was teaching my children how to please people. And after the attack, I started changing the way I interacted. I started advocating for myself and for them, especially at schools. I was advocating for them on a daily basis. And they advocate for themselves now, and they have a voice, and they're able to say no. And I'm just so proud of them. And I realized it was because I changed I modeled something different for them. And as a result, they're much more powerful in their own lives, and that makes everything so worth it, the struggle and the time it's taken to get here. If I look around at my kids and see how powerful they are in their own lives,
Mm,
it just it means so much. It's beautiful. I wouldn't, I think without this attack, you know I don't think that the attack was wonderful, but I think that some of the things that came out of it were life-changing and important and needed to happen.
yeah. Yeah. And what you said about modeling for your children the way that is healthy to be in the world.
Yeah.
And a lot of moms think they have to sacrifice and they have to martyr themselves to be good moms.
Mm.
And I have to tell you, it's the same with me. When I got divorced, my kids were not used to me setting boundaries and saying, you know what, I'm not going to be running all those errands for you. I run a business now and you have to help. And here's your chore list. And that's what builds self-esteem. It's not us
Yeah.
bending over backwards to do it all for them. It's giving them a voice. And so you modeled for them and for your students and for everybody around you to be empowered for themselves, which is really a beautiful thing.
Thank you. I mean, that means so much just to be able to, I know that that's true. And I don't know if I had looked at the person that I am now as a kid or as a teenager, even in my 20s and 30s, I don't know what I would have thought because I was so focused on everybody else and pleasing them. And I think I would have been quite shocked. But maybe, I don't know. It's so funny to see yourself in a different place and empowered and advocating for yourself and having a voice and having agency in your life and a different way of being. At the core, I'm still the same person, but that I didn't know who that person was, and I didn't know how to let her out. When I finally looked around and realized that there was this little girl inside wanting to get out, wanting to tell her story, wanting to be heard, and she has a voice now.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's almost like I just got this vision of the violence cracked open this part of you to come out. It's like it gave it space for it to come out into the light.
Yeah. Do you know my book was originally called The Little Girl Is Me?
Oh,
And I changed the title, but it was, for the longest time it was The Little Girl Is Me. And that was because I was having a conversation with one of my dear friends, and we were talking about the first section of my book. And it was about my daughter's reaction to the violence. And I said, I couldn't look at her because I was bleeding and I didn't want her to become afraid. And I said, I wonder how, what she took from that. Did she think I was ashamed, that I didn't love her? And my friend said, Christine, a little girl's not going to feel that way. she's not going to feel ashamed. She's not going to feel shame or that you don't love her anymore. Maybe she's, afraid. That's probably a better reaction, but she's not ashamed. And I said, but it needs to be in there. I kept telling her it needed to be in her. And then finally she said, maybe this little girl isn't your daughter. Maybe she's you. Maybe you feel that way. And then all these bells and whistles went off. And I said, oh my gosh, this little girl isn't my daughter. The little girl is me. And I went and I reread the book. At that point, I thought the book was about race. I had been I'm this white woman from a small Italian-American town, and I was exploring race after the attack, trying to understand race better because I didn't know much about race. But my friend said, Christine, you've got to add this back into the book. And I reread the book, and there was this ashamed little girl running through all of the pages. She was there, and I didn't even know the book was about her until that point. So for a while, it was the little girl is me, just because she was trying to come out the whole time, trying to get her voice heard. And it was almost manifest destiny in some respects. I was writing this book. I had no idea why I was writing it. I kept writing chapters. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know why I was writing it. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and write something down. And then suddenly I realized this book was about so much more. I went and told my parents, and that was so liberating. And suddenly I started feeling my voice, the beginning of who I was, because I was being honest about, this major trauma in my life. And I told my friend right then and there about the two events, and she couldn't believe it. She said, this has been here the whole time and we didn't even realize it. So it was such a powerful experience writing. Writing actually helped me get to this point. It was really powerful. And again, I think the girl inside wanted to get out, but she couldn't. And writing was the only way to do it. I was fighting for my voice, my life in some respects.
Yeah, it's that chapter at the end was so powerful. And also that you bolded, it's not your fault.
Yes.
And that you hadn't put bold anywhere else. And your friend said, you didn't do that anywhere else. So you're telling yourself it's not my fault. And that was powerful because, again, so many people, especially women, take that message. It's my fault. Abuse is my fault. I brought it on. And somebody actually said something to you about the violence, that you might have brought it on. Like, you're too trusting, and it's your fault, right? Like, it was that. Oof.
That I'm not surprised that this happened. You're too trusting, too open to the world. And then a lot of people were talking to my mom, and they were saying, well, I wouldn't get attacked because I hold my purse tight and I hold my keys like this, and they were, everyone was saying to me and my family that they wouldn't get attacked right after we told the story. And I think the reason was they just so didn't want to admit that this could happen to them. It brings out everybody's worst fear when your friend is standing there with a black eye and a broken nose saying that she was attacked in a parking lot in front of her kids. That's terrifying for anybody. And so we put distance between ourselves and that story. And a lot of people did it by asking me the race of the attacker, which infuriated me. And that's why I started writing in the first place. I said, I've got to figure this out. Why are people asking me this question? I don't understand it. Why aren't they asking me about my kids or my black eye? Like, why is this the first question that people are asking? And I was super naive. Now I understand a lot more about the world. And it was because of this investigation. But, I think by investigating race, by talking with people about their experience with racism, by talking to people about their experience with violence, even illness and the death of a loved one, they did it with such power and with such strength. And it allowed me to finally come out with my own two experiences with trauma and talk about it for the first time in my life. And that was, it was necessary. It had to happen if I wanted to embody myself, like my own, if I wanted to have a voice and if I wanted to live my own life and have advocacy, this is what needed to happen. I needed to learn how to tell my story in a powerful way. And that's what I did learn.
Yeah, I find people's response to crisis in general is always fascinating to me. And I I know that for me, I started to educate people about how I wanted to be talked to. Um, I had a child born with a genetic disease, and people would say really terrible things and stupid things. And even so I lost a child, and so people would say, "Oh, you understand loss, so you would understand. You know exactly what those other people are thinking." And I would say, "No, I know what it is to lose a child, but I don't know what their experience is."
Yeah, yeah,
So I ask, "How are you doing?" And when I got divorced and people would say, "I'm so sorry." And I'd say, "You know what? That's not really the way I want to be spoken to. I appreciate your concern, but a better thing to say to me would be, 'How you doing?'"
yeah, yeah. It's, I found that the people who sat and listened as though it was the only thing they had to do that day, maybe
Hmm.
they didn't say a word, those were the responses that helped me the most.
Mm.
That's what helped me turn the corner and feel as though I was being heard. But
Yeah.
when people told me what they would do instead, or that it was my fault, or if they tried to impose their understanding on mine, it wasn't allowing me to figure it out. It wasn't allowing me to be heard. And in a way, just like the fact that you're bearing witness to my story right now, that helps me to digest it. Every time I tell this story, it loses power. And I thank you for bearing witness, and you're doing it with, such strength yourself,
Mm.
and you're asking the right questions. You're asking questions because you want to understand better. And I just think that's where we can be there for each other, listening to their stories.
Sharing our stories is so powerful on so many levels. And what often we don't realize is that by sharing a story, let's say I wasn't punched in the face in front of my kids, I
Hmm.
wasn't molested, I wasn't raped, but I had other traumas. And
Yeah.
when you share your story, it touches us in some way. Like we will remember something. Like I had a weird uncle who touched me in a weird way. And I started thinking about that. Like he spent an entire day with me and didn't return me back home to my parents when he was supposed to. And kissed me too much. It was like there was something really odd about it, and it stayed with me for a long time. So, you remember things, and we start telling our stories, and there is such power in sharing. Every time I read a novel written about a culture that I'm not familiar with, but we all experience the same types of fears and sadness and finding our voice. I mean, that's a common thing that so many people can relate to. So we don't have to experience the exact same trauma to be able to find value in your story.
Thank you. People haven't experienced the same thing as we've experienced. Everybody has different experiences, but I do agree with you that sometimes the way an experience makes us feel is the same or very similar. Like when I was talking to people who had experienced racism, that feeling of being diminished rang really true for me. Some of the things they were saying about how they felt, I've never experienced racism, but I have felt feeling diminished, and I have lost my voice. I know what that's like. And so that resonated with me a
Mm.
lot, a lot.
Yeah, I totally hear that. And I love hearing about people who are very different from me and had different experiences growing up. And because it's so easy to look at someone and judge them and
Yeah.
not know their whole story. One of the parts I loved in the book was when you went to the school and visited that amazing teacher who is doing incredible things with students, and it spoke to me. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about that. But I as a parent of kids who were not um, in the box learners, I really would advocate for my children always in having teachers really see them for who they were and appreciate their creativity and their way of thinking. And so few teachers could do it. So few teachers could really see my children. And one day my daughter, my oldest, who's now 31 and expecting her third baby, I can't believe it. Um, she was in her gap year in Israel on her gap year, and at the end of the school year, the teacher, it was their first year as a school, and they had a banquet, and the principal of the school acknowledged each one of the girls personally and saw them saw them for who they were. And I remember my daughter called me and she started to cry, and she said, I feel seen. And she said he was talking about how I always draw in class, because that was her way of taking notes, was drawing pictures. And he said, you have a perspective that I don't have, and I know that you're seeing things and feeling things that I can't even imagine through your drawings. Instead of saying, you never take notes and you're always doodling, he saw the value in it. And she was so moved by that. And, we were talking before about the power of being seen and the power of being heard. So I just, I love that whole story of that teacher. So yes, if you could share a little bit about that.
He's an amazing teacher in Atlanta, and I had a whole group of students that semester, the semester I was attacked, and they were stunning students, and they just went with it. I walked into class with a black eye and a broken nose and told them why. And the class was called How We Learn. And I was hoping that I'd have a future politician in my class, or somebody who could make changes in education so that children would be seen like your daughter. And then this happened, and I realized life is short. I better get going. So we started finding schools that we could go to, and I found this one teacher, and he's a Freedom Writers teacher. He had been trained by the Freedom Writers Association, and he's just stunning. So we ended up creating a partnership with him and his students, and we would go there and talk with them. And so with this one story talks about how his name's Mr. Waller, and Mr. Waller helped me to connect again with people, because I was feeling, I don't know, very alone. And I was surrounded by students, and they were helping me connect with people. But we went over there. Most of his students were from single family homes, and they heard gunshots every night, and they had struggles. So when he started teaching there, his students were reading, his third graders were reading at maybe a first grade level, and they were way behind in math. And he decided that he was going to teach them by reading things about overcoming obstacles. And so they would read things about overcoming obstacles and then talk about their own lives. And in this way, they would remember the material and they'd learn, and they were excited about learning. And then he would break them into learning styles groups, and he would say, could my kinesthetic learners please stand up and tell me how you did this math problem? And they'd stand up and they'd tell the whole class, and he would appreciate them. And he'd create SAT words, and the SAT words were great words from SAT books that describe yourself. So a student would stand up and say, I'm perspicacious, and they were only in fourth grade. And they'd have all these great words themselves. He was amazing. And so my students were so moved by his teaching methods. I was moved. We had a student who brought her grandparents once to a field trip. And by the end, everybody was crying. It's just the grandparent had experienced poverty. And he was just talking about his experience with poverty. He would sneak into the library and read every day, and how these students were inspiring him so much. He could relate to them, but he also related to their spirit and the way they were approaching life, and how they were overcoming obstacles and inhabiting their bodies and figuring out who they were at such young ages. It was powerful.
It was so moving. When somebody really sees the essence of a person and brings it out, I mean, to me, that is the ultimate. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
You're welcome. I think that's what we all ultimately want to be, is seen. And that's why women who experience trauma, they're no longer seen sometimes. And and that's how I lost myself. I had a story that I couldn't tell, and it silenced me.
Yeah. No, it's my greatest joy as a coach is to take all the layers away and to reveal the
Mm.
true essence of who a person is, because we start out that way. We start out with this amazing light inside us, and we have to be careful not to dim it, and to take away all those obstacles, because there is an incredible light in everybody.
I agree. And one thing I always try to communicate about my own journey is this idea that people are complex. We have, like you said, everybody has a light inside of them. And a lot of people who commit violence have already experienced violence themselves. So that's one thing. And also the complexity of those people, they can actually be shining lights themselves. And part of what shuts us down, at least what shut me down, was the complexity of this figure in my life who molested me, who had done so many positive things and yet had done something so awful. And I couldn't talk about him because basically we weren't looking at his complexities. We weren't saying that people are complex. And there's a real, good or kind of saint monster paradigm that I think our community has to delve deeper in and see the complexities of people. If somebody had said, this person can do good things, but also do ugly things, things that you have a right to be angry about, then that would have helped me talk about it and my family. People can do public good and private bad. And I feel that we don't talk about that. And so as a result, there are so many men out there who are accused of something like this. And everybody says, no, he couldn't have done that. He's such a good guy. And, maybe he's done these great things. It's hard to negate great things that somebody has done, but I don't even think by saying that they've done something horrible, that should negate those things. We can say, yeah, that person has done good things, but they've done something that has changed my life in a really damaging way. And I also want to acknowledge that it can be both things.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. I appreciate that. And I think that often, even in our own families with our parents, it's very easy if you come from a very dysfunctional home to say, my father was a horrible person. But when you look at the complexity of someone's life, where they came from, how they were treated, people are doing the best they can. It doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make it excusable if they treated you terribly, but you can have more
No.
compassion. And I think compassion is the key here. Like, you can feel for someone and not excuse their behavior.
Right. I mean, I think we have such a right to be angry if
Yes.
somebody molests us or rapes us, or the anger is we all have a right to be angry. But I'm almost thinking for the family to say that there's no complexity in these people is doing the survivor a disservice, and also the family, because then there's nowhere to go, especially if the whole family loves that person. Then how do you start talking about this other thing? You can't. There's no, I found myself saying, well, this couldn't have happened to me because he's such a good guy. I must have misunderstood it. But then as life went on, I knew I hadn't misunderstood. I didn't know how to express it because there was no room for that in this society.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you found your voice.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So as we come to an end, I have a couple more questions. First, I'd like to know what your vision is for the future.
I would love to live in a world where we could talk about the complexities of life, where we could have difficult conversations, and where we could communicate in a real deep way about important things without brushing them aside, without ignoring them, without saying that, after 3 months we have to stop talking about them because we need to move on. I feel as though for us, I see in the future a place where we can really talk and connect and not shut each other down, and talk in a respectful way, in a kind way, in a way where we see each other and where they see us.
Beautiful. So what is the best advice
Absolutely.
that you can give to a woman who has given up her value in the past and wants to become more empowered, find her voice?
Well, I would say start small, because a lot of times we're not ready to look at the big picture. And what I mean by starting small is, if you're a person who doesn't really care about yourself and doesn't listen to her own voice, maybe start with a sandwich. You know, what type of sandwich do you want? If everybody wants, I don't know, roast beef, and you want vegetarian, and they say, well, this place only serves roast beef, say, well, you know, is there a place that serves both? You know, can we get both? Just start with the sandwich, and then to more difficult things, because it's a muscle, I think. It took a while for me. I had to talk about race and people experiencing race and racism, and get comfortable talking about things that I was uncomfortable talking about, because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. That was hard for me to do, but that was easier for me to do than talk about having been molested or having been raped. So and I think once I started creeping into that area, and I did it very slowly. I would ask questions and then I'd step back, and I sometimes I wouldn't be able to hear the answers, but I just did it gradually. So start with the sandwich is my advice. Start with something that's non-threatening, and then you know, I think it happened very naturally for me. I became determined to move forward with my story, and I did it gradually. Even the man who molested me, I first told my parents and my brothers that I had been molested. Then maybe 3 years later, 4 years later, I told them who it was. I couldn't
Oh,
do
wow.
anything at once because it was too threatening. So it was just in little increments that I
Hmm.
gained the courage. And then eventually I was telling everyone. You know, I was on NPR recently on live radio talking about it. You know, if that's what I mean by, like, if I had spoken, or if I as a younger person had seen myself now talking on NPR, talking to you on a podcast, you know, and having this be public knowledge. I don't know. I really don't know how I would have react. I would react, because it's just it was so far away from what I was doing. I wanted to keep it secret. I didn't want anyone to know. I was terrified of people knowing and possibly rejecting me for this information. So I would say start small, do something that's non-threatening, and just when you're ready, as you're comfortable, move into more important things.
Great advice. And a really good title for your next book, Start with a Sandwich.
Yes, start with the sandwich. I know. Oh, and the other thing is, I think, about finding your voice, and about, you know, the sandwich metaphor. Um, Really don't push yourself into anything until you're ready, and let it be your story, not somebody else's. You know, let it come out the way you want it to come out, and let it come out when you're ready and how you want it to come out, and let them be your words. You know, you define who you are. But do it in your own speed, in your own speed. And the other thing I would say is, try to feel, after a while of answering questions or asking questions and getting your voice out there, you'll start to refine your ideas. You know, it'll allow you to see what you actually feel and believe about topics. And as people ask you more questions, you'll go deeper into that, because you have to. And ultimately, now what I try to do is let every cell of my body resonate with who I am at every minute of every day. So if I'm not acting, you know, if yeah, I can feel it in my stomach when something's not right, and I listen right away.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of doing this work, because the more you do it, the more you feel it. And
Yes.
so the beginning we were talking about the disembodiment, and now you're embodying. And I think this is an important message for everyone, to stop being so disconnected from your body, because your body holds so much wisdom and your feelings
Yes.
hold so much wisdom. And so we can't just function as a head. You know, it's like it takes its toll
Yeah.
over time. And that's the process that you start to really know and trust, this is the right decision for me. I don't have to second guess I
Yeah.
don't, I know it in my heart, in my gut.
Absolutely. And my stomach, it'll go, right? Like
Yeah.
if somebody asks me to do something I don't like, my stomach just immediately feels like it twists, it's saying, no,
Yeah.
don't do that, please.
I see with my
Mhm.
clients, sometimes they'll still be reacting and they'll notice it quicker. And
Oh,
then sometimes they have to apologize for overreacting to something because it's a trigger from the past. But they have the language now to speak up and to say, I'm sorry, that was not about you. And I mean, just being able to do that is huge. It's a big victory.
and it's a lifelong journey. I mean, occasionally I'll fall back into the old patterns, but like you said, I recognize it a lot sooner, and I'm able to pull myself out of it faster.
Yeah, it's the speed in which we process. We can't undo a lifetime in a year or two. How would you like to be remembered?
Well, I'd like to be remembered as somebody who spoke her truth and who wanted to change the world in a way so that we could communicate in a more meaningful, authentic way with each other. Somebody who wanted to lessen the world's pain through talking, and somebody who wanted to bear witness to others' stories.
Wow, that's really beautiful. And all the silent spaces are being filled up with voice right now, which is so important. And you really have brought a gift to the world by writing this book, and really was beautifully written. And I love how you also juxtapose the retrogression with the book itself. And for anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, go get the book and you'll find out. um, yeah, thank you so much, Christine, for sharing your story so that other people can share theirs and find their voice.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing your stories too. They're powerful.
If you would like to step more fully into your value, grab a free copy of The Ultimate Guide to Becoming a Woman of Value on my website, thewomanofvalue.com. Just click the link at the top of the homepage. And if you haven't already done so, be sure to click the subscribe button in your listening app. And if there's something in this episode that inspired you, please share it with others, because the more we share these inspirational stories, the more women of value we will have in this world. I'll see you next time.